At just 12 years old, Miguel's life changed forever. In a single tragic accident, he lost his parents and little sister, leaving him alone in a world that suddenly felt cold and empty. With only a worn-out guitar and memories of laughter to hold on to, he wondered if hope could ever find him again, until a single note sparked something miraculous. The rain fell in heavy sheets over the narrow streets of Manila, bouncing off the cracked pavement and turning puddles into mirrors of a gray, unforgiving sky. Under the relentless drizzle, 12-year-old Miguel sat huddled on the curb, his tiny frame shaking not from the cold, but from a grief too heavy for someone so young to bear. His hands, small and trembling, clutched a worn-out guitar that had once belonged to his father, the only tangible link left to the family he had lost. Next to him lay a few crumpled photographs, soaked through, yet stubbornly holding the faces of his mother, father, and little sister. Their smiles mocked the emptiness of the world around him. Miguel's eyes, wide and haunted, scanned the street as neighbors passed by, some lowering their eyes, others whispering condolences he didn't have the strength to hear. No one stopped long enough to truly see him, not the way he longed to be seen. He was invisible, swallowed by sorrow and by a city that continued its rhythm without pause. Indifferent to the boy whose world had shattered. The accident had happened so suddenly. One moment, his family was laughing around the dinner table, sharing jokes and small triumphs of the day. The next, a speeding car had stolen them all in a cruel instant. The memory haunted him: his mother's gentle laugh, his father's protective hand, his sister's mischievous grin fading into silence. The images replayed in his mind like a broken film reel, and every tear that fell seemed to remind him that there was no way to rewind, no way to bring them back. Miguel hugged his knees to his chest, resting his cheek against the cold, wet pavement. The guitar beside him seemed almost useless now, a relic of a life that no longer existed. Yet, despite the crushing weight of despair, a small, stubborn ember of something remained inside him, a spark of resilience he didn't even know he had. He remembered how his father would strum the same guitar, teaching him the chords of old songs, the rhythms of hope and joy. And though it felt impossible, Miguel allowed himself a single thought. Maybe, just maybe, music could be his lifeline, a way to keep the memory of his family alive. As the rain soaked through his clothes, he whispered into the gray, empty street, "I won't forget you. I promise." And somewhere deep inside, he felt a fragile connection to something larger, a force that could turn pain into expression, sorrow into strength. In that quiet, lonely moment, sitting on the curb with rain pouring down around him, Miguel wasn't just a boy who had lost everything. He was a boy on the verge of discovering that even in darkness, a single note could ignite a spark of hope. Little did he know, that spark would not only carry him through his pain, but would one day move the hearts of millions, including one of the toughest critics in the world, Simon Cowell. The small, dimly lit room was quiet except for the soft patter of rain against the window. Miguel sat cross-legged on the wooden floor, his guitar cradled in his lap like a fragile lifeline. The air smelled faintly of old paper and dust, remnants of a home that once rang with laughter and warmth. Shadows danced on the walls as the rain traced streaks down the glass, mirroring the tears that now silently rolled down his cheeks. He hadn't touched the guitar since the accident. For days, it had been shoved in the corner, a painful reminder of everything he had lost. But today, something deep inside whispered that he could no longer remain silent. Hesitantly, he strummed a chord. The sound was tentative, almost broken, yet in that fragile note, there was a flicker of something he hadn't felt in weeks. Connection. Connection to his parents' laughter, to his sister's playful voice, to the memories that refused to fade completely. Miguel closed his eyes and let his fingers move across the strings. At first, it was just a simple melody, stumbling and uneven, like the boy himself. But as he remembered his father's lessons, the way he would guide Miguel's fingers to the right chords, the music began to flow more naturally. He began to sing softly, his voice trembling, carrying the raw weight of sorrow. It wasn't just singing. It was a conversation with the universe, a way to speak the words he couldn't say aloud. Each note held fragments of his grief, his love, and his longing for a family that was gone. The room seemed to breathe with him, the walls absorbing the emotion, the guitar resonating with memories of happier days. He imagined his parents nodding in approval, his sister clapping along, and for a brief, beautiful moment, he felt less alone. Miguel's voice began to take on a surprising quality, deep and resonant beyond his years, echoing the style of the music he had always admired: Elvis Presley. The soft croon, the soulful inflections, the passion behind every note. It was as if the music itself had found a vessel in him. The pain transformed into something transcendent, each chord and lyric a bridge between his broken past and a future that might still hold beauty. Hours passed, but Miguel didn't notice. The rain outside softened, the world beyond the window quieted, and inside, a small miracle unfolded. Grief and hope began to coexist in harmony. The music wasn't just an escape, it was a lifeline, a reminder that even in tragedy, he could create something that mattered, something that could touch hearts far beyond his lonely room. In that intimate, shadowed space, Miguel made a silent vow. He would honor his family through his voice, through the music that connected him to them, and though he didn't yet know how, he felt certain that one day, the songs he sang would carry him out of the darkness and into a world that could hear not just his talent, but the strength of his spirit. The bright lights of the talent show stage hit Miguel the moment he stepped off the backstage ramp. The glare was blinding, making him squint as he tried to focus on the sea of faces before him. The audience stretched far beyond what he had ever imagined: hundreds of people, their eyes flicking between him and the judges' panel. He felt a shiver run down his spine. For a moment, he thought about turning back, running to the safety of his empty room, where his guitar had always been a comforting friend. But something stronger held him in place: the memory of his family, the vow he had made in the quiet of his room, and the tiny ember of hope that had refused to die. Miguel's small hands gripped the neck of his guitar. He could feel his heartbeat thundering in his chest, each beat like a drum of nerves and anticipation. The audience seemed like an ocean, vast and endless, and he, just a single drop of water, trembling at the edge. The judges' expressions were unreadable: Simon Cowell with his famously stern face, the others waiting politely, some skeptical, some curious. No one spoke. No one moved. The silence was heavy, almost oppressive, yet it carried a strange power. It was a challenge and an invitation at the same time. He took a deep breath, closing his eyes for a moment. The memory of his parents' laughter, his sister's excited giggle, the gentle guidance of his father's hands on the guitar, they all swirled together in his mind. And then, he let the music flow. A single chord filled the air, shaky at first, then stronger, as his confidence grew. The soft, soulful tone of his voice cut through the silence, a tender melody that spoke of loss, love, and longing. At first, the audience was still unsure what to make of this small boy on a massive stage. But, as he continued, pouring every ounce of his emotion into the performance, the room seemed to lean in, collectively holding its breath. The trembling in his hands disappeared as his voice found its rhythm, resonating with a depth far beyond his years. Each note, tinged with the style of the singer he admired most, Elvis Presley, was filled with the raw honesty of someone who had experienced true heartbreak. The judges exchanged glances. Simon Cowell's stern face softened slightly as Miguel's voice wrapped around him, carrying the unspoken story of a boy who had lost everything yet still dared to dream. It wasn't just a performance, it was a confession, a tribute, a plea for connection. The audience felt it too. Eyes glistened, some faces tilted forward, some hands gripping the armrests as if holding on to the fragile hope Miguel was offering through his music. By the time the first song ended, the silence that followed was almost unbearable. It was a pause heavy with awe, a moment suspended in time. Miguel, chest heaving, opened his eyes, scanning the crowd. For the first time in months, he didn't feel invisible. He had stepped into the spotlight, and the world was listening, not just to his music, but to his story, his pain, and his courage. Little did he know. One note more, one chord more, would change everything and move, even the hardest heart in the room, Simon Cowell, to tears. The final verse began quietly, almost like a whisper. Miguel's voice softened, but the emotion behind it grew stronger, heavier, more powerful than anything the audience had heard that night. Each word trembled with love, with loss, with memories too painful to speak, yet too precious to forget. His voice filled the auditorium, rising and falling in heartbreaking waves, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Miguel's eyes stayed closed as he sang, not because he was nervous anymore, but because he was somewhere else, somewhere deep inside the memories of his family. He could almost see his mother smiling in the kitchen, hear his father humming while tuning the guitar, feel his little sister wrapping her small arms around him. Every lyric was a message to them, a message of longing and gratitude, and even though he had lost them, he wanted the world to know one thing: their love had not died. On the judges' panel, something unexpected was happening. The typically unshakable Simon Cowell, known worldwide for his tough critiques and emotionless exterior, leaned forward in his seat. His eyes, usually sharp and analytical, softened with an expression no one could remember seeing before: vulnerability. Miguel hit the final chorus, drawing out the note with breathtaking control, filled with a raw ache that could only come from someone who had truly suffered. The audience began to shift, not out of restlessness, but out of overwhelming emotion. A woman in the front row covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. A man next to her blinked rapidly, trying to stop himself from crying but failing. Throughout the theater, breaths were shallow, chests tight. Miguel's voice wasn't just beautiful, it was human. It carried the kind of pain that connected every person in the room to their own deepest memories, their own losses, their own hopes. And then, in the most powerful moment of the performance, Miguel looked up. With tears streaming down his cheeks, he sang the final line, a soft, trembling promise of love that would never fade. The stage lights hit his face just right, illuminating the purity of the emotion pouring out of him. The guitar faded into silence. For 3 long seconds, the theater was silent. Then came the sound of Simon Cowell rising from his seat. The crowd gasped. Simon didn't stand unless something was extraordinary. His eyes glassy with tears, he brought a hand to his mouth, visibly trying to steady himself. Miguel stared back at him in disbelief. Simon approached the microphone, voice cracking slightly as he tried to speak. That, he managed, pausing to swallow emotion, was one of the most honest and powerful performances I've ever heard in my life. The audience erupted, not in ordinary applause, but in thunderous, emotional cheering. People stood on their feet, clapping, crying, shouting Miguel's name. It wasn't just admiration. It was love, gratitude, connection. Miguel stood frozen, overwhelmed. He had stepped onto this stage as a boy carrying grief, but in that moment, he was someone else, someone who had turned pain into beauty, someone who had touched millions without even knowing it. And while he didn't yet understand how much this moment would change his life, one thing was already clear. Simon Cowell didn't just see talent in Miguel, he saw a story the world needed to hear. Backstage, the roar of the audience still echoed through the walls. But Miguel heard nothing except the pounding of his own heartbeat. He stood motionless, tears drying on his face, his small hands still gripping the guitar, as though it were the only thing keeping him steady. For the first time in what felt like forever, his cheeks were not wet with grief, but with relief. With validation, with a feeling he had forgotten, being seen. Without warning, Simon Cowell stepped through the curtains. Miguel froze. His eyes widened as the judge who changed thousands of lives walked toward him with a softness the world rarely witnessed. Simon didn't say anything at first, he simply knelt down and pulled Miguel into a heartfelt embrace, holding him the way a father holds a child who has finally let their pain out. Miguel felt his breath catch as the warmth of that hug broke down the emotional walls he had been holding up since the accident. "You're not alone anymore," Simon whispered. I promise you that those 5 words shattered something inside Miguel, not in a painful way, but like a weight breaking free. Only then did he fully realize what had happened out there on the stage. He hadn't just sung a song. He had opened his heart. And the world, a world that once seemed cold and indifferent, had opened its heart back to him. Within minutes, the production team, judges, crew, and even other contestants approached one by one, offering hugs, words of encouragement, and promises of support. A camera assistant slipped him a small note that read, "Your family is proud of you." A fellow contestant placed her jacket around his shoulders, whispering, "You're strong." Miguel felt overwhelmed, not by pain this time, but by kindness. And it didn't stop backstage as his audition aired across television and social media platforms. Something miraculous happened. Millions of people across the world saw his story, not just a performance, but the resilience of a boy who chose to rise instead of collapse. Support poured in from every direction. People sent donations, messages, and offers to help. Music schools reached out with full scholarships. Families wrote to him, saying that his courage helped them face their own grief. Young kids sent drawings of him holding a guitar under stage lights. Even celebrities shared his audition, calling him an inspiration. Soon after the show wrapped that night, Simon approached Miguel, again this time not as a judge, but as a mentor. "If you're willing," he said gently, "I'd like to help you build a future in music. You have something the world needs." Miguel didn't hesitate. For the first time since the tragedy, he felt something that had once seemed impossible: hope. Not the fragile kind that breaks easily, but the kind built on love, resilience, and connection. The stage lights had not just illuminated a young boy's talent. They had reignited his future. And though Miguel would always miss his parents and little sister, he carried them with him in every song he sang. Their love became his strength, their memory became his purpose, and their spirit lived in every note that reached the hearts of millions. Miguel had lost a family, but through music, kindness, and compassion, he found another. And somewhere in the universe, where love never fades, his parents and sister were smiling once more.